What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. The Indiana Hoosiers are national champions of college football. That is a sentence that, if uttered 2 years ago, you would be put in an insane asylum for, because they were the bottom, the cellar, the doormat of the Big Ten Conference, the losingest team in college football history. Well, now there's another title that goes before Indiana football national champions. What a run over the last 2 years, really, but especially this season for the Indiana Hoosiers, and they did it with a good win, really in all sorts of ways, against Miami. In this video, I'm going to be talking all about that national championship game, as well as kind of touching on a little bit my thoughts on just this journey that Indiana has been on. But before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. A couple of key storylines really from this one. Mendoza had his moment in this game, that infamous or famous fourth down play, whatever side you're looking at it from. Curt Cignetti caps the most incredible and the most unlikely turnaround in college football history. We've had some pretty incredible ones before. I kind of think of Auburn, for example. I know they didn't win in 2013, but I think they had, 3 wins, and then they go to the national championship game. I think 13 wins on the way to get there. There are some other really good turnarounds. That's a recent one, but there is none that has been like this. You could not write it in a Hollywood script. I mean, this is all the interconnectedness, too, that Mendoza's dad played high school football with Miami head coach Mario Cristobal. I mean, the guy who gets the game-clinching interception that I'll talk about later is related. I think the nephew of the player from Miami who was called for the pass interference against Ohio State in the 2002 national championship game. I mean, so many different tie-ins. Even that the guy who Mendoza was kind of able to truck through on his, really championship ceiling touchdown was Wesley Besainth, who had hit him really hard in a game when those two played last year when Mendoza was at Cal. But so many other storylines to go through. The biggest one, though, the most important one, is that Indiana has gone from Big Ten and really college football doormats, losingest team in college football, to national champions and kings of college football. Shout out the Big Ten. College football right now really runs through the Big Ten Conference. They've won the last 3 national championships. Now I know SEC fans out there, you all had your run, and I don't think your success is over yet by any means, but it's definitely a more even playing field. And I know the SEC dominated before the last 3 years. I'm not, overlooking that. But the Big Ten is where it's at in college football right now. Michigan in 2023, Ohio State last year, and now Indiana. Let's talk about this game. It was one where Indiana was kind of in control for really most of the game. Miami hung around, made some efforts to come back. A big play that kind of, I think, highlights just how multifaceted this team is was Mikhail Kamara's punt block, which was recovered in the end zone by Isaiah Jones. I think at that point, it was a 10-7 game. Miami was still right in that game. They had a chance. They had been down 10-0 at halftime, score a touchdown on a Mark Fletcher run to start the second half. Game really stays in the Hoosiers' favor on that punt block, one that wasn't really even designed that way. It was just kind of one where Kamara was uninhibited to the punter and got the block, and then Isaiah Jones with the recovery. Miami drove down the field then. Fletcher punched in his second touchdown of the game to cut the deficit to 17-14. And then we get to 4th and 5, and Joel Klatt talked about this in his breakdown of the national championship. But before this play, Indiana looked kind of scattered, kind of all over the place, unsure of what they were doing on the play. And they call a timeout before, and then they come out in this set that Fernando Mendoza talked about. If the defense looked a certain way, they were going to run a play, and it ended up that they played one of those split defenses where half the field's in man, half the field's in zone. So he goes with what wasn't actually, I don't think, based on what he said post-game in his interview with Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter, I don't think it was a designed QB draw, even though a lot of us thought it was initially. But he takes it, he runs with it, he kind of fights through a couple of tackles and continues bulldozing his way into the end zone, reaching across in a moment that looks like and will be just as important as Vince Young's touchdown against USC in the 2005 national championship game. So an incredible play, incredible effort for the Heisman Trophy winner, 12-yard touchdown run, and that is his Heisman moment. I tweeted this out from my personal Twitter that this was kind of one of those years where the Heisman Trophy finalists really, and even the winner, didn't have one of those signature plays. Now, they don't get me wrong, they all had really good seasons. Pavio was kind of that flashy guy. Mendoza was the more surgical, efficient quarterback, but nobody really had one of those like key moments or just that flair that Heisman Trophy winners have had. Well, this is it for Fernando Mendoza, and believe me, he had his moments before, but this is his moment. It gives Indiana a 24-14 lead. Miami then answers again as Carson Beck found Malachi Toney for a 22-yard touchdown pass. Niko Radicic hits a field goal for Indiana to push the lead to 6. And then something that gets overlooked, because it did kind of feel like Indiana was kind of in control. It felt like they were in this position where Miami wasn't going to be able to come back, but they had a chance. Not only did Miami have a chance to tie the game, but they had a chance late in the game with under a minute left, close to the 50, to go down, score a touchdown, kick the game-winning extra point to win the national championship in their home stadium. I think that gets overlooked. I mean, this was a one-possession game that came down to the wire, and ultimately it was kind of a little bit of an ill-advised pass, but also really good defensive coverage. Carson Beck kind of tried to fit it in a window that wasn't really there. It seemed like his receiver wasn't really quite ready for it on the play, and Jamari Sharp comes in and gets the game-clinching interception, something that I think Richard Sherman tweeted out. I saw this on an X afterwards, was about how it's exactly what you want to see from a quarterback. If you know that it's not something in the flat, then you stay with your guy. I'll put the tweet up here because I'm not exactly remembering it right now, but it was really good defensive play. And then a couple kneel downs, and Indiana, confetti falls on them. Curt Cignetti, the most incredible turnaround in college football history. And really, this proves in a whole new era of college football, obviously the transfer portal era, that's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around a bunch, but it shows that, for one, developmental coaching is still one of the most important things and can still win you national championships. Yes, they got those players out of the portal. It's not what Ohio State did last year, which is bringing in, a couple of really high caliber players like a Caleb Downs, like a Quinshon Judkins, even Will Howard at quarterback, some of those former, 4 or 5 star recruits from high caliber programs. It's also not quite what Michigan did in 2023. Michigan was almost kind of the closing of the door and almost the midway point into this new era of college football, where the Wolverines had developed so well under Jim Harbaugh, and it was this long process, almost a decade that he spent there. And you can get into all you want, the discussion about how Michigan got there, but as far as we know, they were not cheating when they won that national championship. They won those games on the field. They beat those teams pretty comprehensively, especially against Washington in the national championship game. But this was very different. This was an Indiana team that both developed and brought in players from the transfer portal. I mean, Kamara was a player who came in from James Madison. Obviously, Mendoza, the transfer quarterback from Cal. There are so many different players dotting the Hoosiers roster that I could go through who transferred into the program. None of them, though, or very few of them, were 5 or even 4-star prospects coming out of high school. So it's an incredible lesson in coaching and development, and also just scouting, being able to go out and see that these were the guys that if you bring them all together, the sum of the parts is, or the whole is greater than each of the parts. I think I messed up that quote a little bit there, but basically it's that each individual piece might not even start at other programs, but they were also perfectly aligned together and on that singular mission and focus that they got the job done and won the national championship. So to me, it shows that it's not all about just getting those 5-star prospects to come to your program and you're going to win a national championship. It's also not that you can just develop. I mean, sure, I think either one is still a possibility, but I think this shows that a team like Indiana, who can mesh those pieces together perfectly and pick up the right guys in the portal, again, not always the flashiest, but the right guys, can put it all together and win a national championship. And I think with a coach like Curt Cignetti and the ability to, bring in new pieces as other guys go on, like Curtis Rourke leaving last year and then bringing in Mendoza, who proved to be the perfect addition at quarterback, it shows that I think there is some sustainability for Indiana. They're going to have a huge one next year. It's already been announced on the schedule. October 17th, they'll host Ohio State, obviously a rematch of the Big Ten championship game. And for Miami, Mario Cristobal. he's kind of gone more that Jim Harbaugh in Michigan route, and he was so close to being able to win that national championship. He's gone with more of that development. Now, of course, Miami, they get a lot of those 4- and 5-star guys, but this was not an overnight turnaround for Miami. I think as well, the Hurricanes have a pretty sustainable model there. Now, I think they had kind of the perfect storm this year. I don't know if we'll see quite the same from them next year, but I think in the ACC, assuming they don't lose a ton of guys, Cristobal doesn't up and leave, which I would be very surprised by, I think they are quite clearly the favorite in the ACC, and I think a strong contender to the very least, win that ACC championship and get to the quarterfinals in 2026, and maybe even get back to the semifinals. And then looking at the rest of college football, I have kind of my final end of season top 10. Obviously, Indiana's number 1. Miami's number 2. They won 3 very tough, probably the toughest road out of anybody in the field, even comparing them to Indiana, although you could say Indiana just made it look easy by the way they played. But either way, Miami had three really good wins, really close, tight wins. Ohio State at the end of the day looks like a 10-point game, but that was because of a late touchdown. That was a close game for Miami. That was a close game, and then obviously in the first round you got Texas A&M, and then beating Ole Miss in a very close game. Good back and forth classic in the semifinals. I've got Ohio State at 3. Now I know you think that Ole Miss and Oregon should probably be ahead of them because they made it around further, and you might think, seeing the helmet behind me, that this is all biased, but my reasoning for this, and it's what makes kind of it tough to split hairs between Ohio State and really Ole Miss, is that, the Buckeyes, their only 2 losses this year were to the 2 teams that made it here by, 3 points to Indiana, and then by 10 points, basically 3 points against Miami. So that is what I think kind of Ohio State. I think Ole Miss is right there, pretty even. I mean, I would really say it's kind of a 2-way tie there for number 3. I've got Oregon at 5, Georgia at 6, Texas Tech at 7. I'm going to go with Texas A&M at number 8, Alabama at 9, and then Notre Dame at number 10, as much as I'd like to knock them some points for opting out of their bowl game. But regardless, they were still one of the top teams. But Miami proved that they were the right team to be in the playoff instead of the Irish, even if the Irish might have made it just this far. But that is my thoughts on the national championship game, Indiana's journey to getting here, and kind of a top 10. I'll also probably have one more video coming up where I go through my biggest surprises. I think that's a pretty obvious choice there. My biggest disappointments from this season, both for teams and for players who I thought maybe really emerged, and maybe some other teams or players who kind of disappointed this year with really high expectations. I think the disappointment's pretty easy as well, because there were 2 teams that I thought were very likely to get to the national championship game, and they didn't even win 8 games. Obviously, that's Penn State and Clemson. But stay tuned for that video. I'll be kind of running down the action and everything from the season. That'll be my last video before probably taking some time off to both just kind of rest and relax, focus on my real job, which is working as a sports editor at a newspaper in the Omaha area. And then hopefully I'll be bringing you guys kind of a brand new look to the set around here. Hopefully maybe some better lighting, better background is kind of the number 1 priority, but stay tuned for that. That's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.